Inescapably.
Escapably foreign.
Welcome to Without Borders, the podcast for immigrants, nomads, or anyone else that feels inescapably foreign. Today I'm here with Nick Synnott again. I got lucky enough that he wanted to be on the show again. And if you didn't hear the last episode, that's episode 2. So I highly recommend you check that one out. And if you want to follow Nick, go to Nick Synnott Travel on Instagram. When I asked Nick how I should prepare for this interview, he just gave me some point form notes. He said, backpacking alone, weed industry in Cali 20 years ago, Sri Lankan ISIS recruitment center.
Yeah, that's a funky one, that's for sure.
All right. Well, before we get into that, I'm gonna let Nick do all the explaining here, but I know that there's a lot of Islamophobia. So before we get into the ISIS story, I want to make sure that we don't contribute to Islamophobia whatsoever. First of all, the Quran. I'm not religious. I read The God Delusion when I was 12 years old, but I have a lot of respect for the Muslim culture, right? In the Quran, they teach to always seek truth, be kind and promote justice, avoid idle talk and gossip, stay away from jealousy, and avoid anger, right? Does not sound like ISIS. But Nick, how did you end up in the ISIS recruitment center?
Well, I mean, what an intro, eh? I'm not religious either, so I wasn't looking for it. That's definitely one thing. Back then, I used to look for it. Now I don't. I'm less stupid than I was when I was much younger. I think the first thing I need to say here is that, I was lucky enough to go to 103 countries in the last 16 years. Sri Lanka is definitely in the top 5 of my favorite country in the world. I love Sri Lanka. Right? It's a great place. It's probably one of the capital of solo traveling. I've never seen that many women travel by themselves in one country. It's extremely safe. There's so many options. I'm not trying to dish Sri Lanka because when I wrote about this in the past and I published a few things, some people got really offended. It's not the case. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I love the country. But it's getting there start with a lot more of a nice story. I was backpacking alone back in the days, traveling, and anyone that travel and backpack alone in countries like that know that you're never really alone, right? You always end up with people. It's what we do, right?
Nick, sorry, I just gotta stop you for 1 second, just because I think your mic is rubbing against your shirt. We tested it out earlier, but it seems to be doing a little bit of rubbing. Is it possible to move a bit, or?
Well, let me hold it. Maybe it's gonna help. It's definitely okay. Yeah, let's try it.
All right, thanks, man.
No worries.
That's the thing about these online recordings, right? Like we try to make the studio as professional as possible, but there's just certain limitations.
Well, I'm in an hotel at SeaWorld, so that's another story. But
okay, we can touch on that a little later.
But yeah, so I was traveling and for a month traveling with two girls from the Netherlands, and it was really, really, really fun. And the first thing you need to know about Sri Lanka is that the entire country is really fun. You can have a drink everywhere. There's a great night scene, except in the capital. In the capital, there's nothing going on. So we've been traveling for a month, and we're in Colombo, and we have no idea what to do, and we're just like, we want to go for a drink, and we're at the hostel, and we're just like, we want to go for a drink. Is there any place? And they're like, yeah, there's no place to go for a drink on a Monday night in Colombo, randomly, So they end up telling us to go to the casino. So we go to the casino, and we start playing, and literally, I think I spent $20, but he started treating us like we were the greatest people in the world, giving us free champagne and free drinks and everything. And the two girls are playing the game like they're behind me and they're pretending that they're with me, and it's getting really funny. And I end up winning at blackjack like $100, like nothing great. But then they're looking at me and they're like, Mr. Synnott, what do you want? Do you need anything? And we're like, well, it's a Monday night. We would have loved to dance and we would have loved to go out, but it's nothing we can do. And they're like, no, definitely, we can help you. So they gave us a limo, and we're just in the limo, and we're just going across town with the driver. And everywhere we stop, the driver say, stay in the car." And he goes out, and he go check the club, and he's like, "Yeah, that's not good," or "That's good." And he does that for like 3, 4 stops, and then he gets us under like a parking mall. It looks very sketchy, but he's like, "Yeah, this is okay." So he's like, "Hey, come on, get out." And the girls start getting out. They're like, "No, you guys stay there. He's going to check it out. If he likes it, we're going to come back." So I go in, and I'm like, this is a little weird, but it's going to do. And so we get in the club. And the first red flag is, half the club is Sri Lankan women dancing. And if there's one thing that you don't see in Sri Lanka, is the local women in clubs or partying or anything like that. I've never seen that. I've been to Sri Lanka a bunch of times, never seen it. But we're like, okay, whatever. So we're there. The second red flag is that the beer that they're selling is Coronas. And you don't see Coronas in Sri Lanka. The only beer you see is Lions. But yeah, we're there, like, whatever. So we start drinking. And at one point, there's a guy that says, "Yeah, come drink in my booth." It's actually the owner. So we're in the booth. He's giving us free drinks. The girls are dancing. Everything is fine until the moment that I go to the bathroom, and then I come back, and then one of the girls looks like really stressed, but I'm having fun, so I'm not checking my phone. I'm doing my things, and at one point, one of the girls was with the owner go dancing, and then she's like, "Look at your phone, Dick." And she's like, "We're in the ISIS recruitment center. We need to get the fuck out of here." And I'm like,
ISIS recruitment centers have Coronas?
and I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? We're drinking and like whatever. It makes no sense, like, and she's like, "Well, you'll see." And then at one point, the owner of the place comes back, and he's like, "Yeah, well, we don't see a lot of white people here. It's great to see that you guys are supporting the cause and you're not judging us." And I'm like, what the heck? And I'm like, what's going on here? So, the long story short is, like, we stick around and start talking about very extreme shit. And at one point, he just goes to the bathroom, and we just got the fuck out of there. We just ran away and we left. But it was just a weird situation, right? Really weird.
What was some of the shit you guys talked about?
I mean, he was talking about Yemen. He was talking about, what's going on what's going on with, like, some of the things in Ethiopia, some of the stuff in Western Africa, just moral grounds, I was getting myself in trouble too, because I was asking him a question about, like, you're Muslim, yeah, but you're drinking, and he was like, yeah, nobody's perfect, and it made no sense, like, it just didn't add up, You're supposed to be that extreme religious person, but you don't follow the basic rule of that religion, right? So.
Yeah, it kind of like points out all the hypocrisies also compared to what I read earlier. Right? Like in the Quran, it points out the ways to live, and then these guys are just doing the complete opposite in some ways, right? They're saying that they're following the most strict rules, but they're not. They're just picking and choosing and doing what they want for their movement.
Yeah, I mean, he was telling me stories about the fact that, this type of activities was helping, raise money towards the cause and stuff like that. But then again, we were the only foreigners in that thing,
Oh shit! Did you buy a Corona?
Oh yeah, I bought a bunch of Coronas.
Oh man, so you unwittingly contributed to
100%. And like on the dance floor, you got those ladies with the like a bunch of bracelets, and like they just walk around, and like they put the bracelet on your arm, and like the girls I was with we thought it was really, really funny at the beginning, so they kept like getting more and more and more and more, but like it just became very sketchy very quickly. But yeah.
Do you think almost everyone there was part of the movement? Because in Sri Lanka, the majority of people are Buddhist, right? That's the main religion there. And then also just has talked about these women dancing around and everything. Doesn't sound very extremist or
I can send you pictures. Like I took pictures that night, you know, and the girl didn't look at all like they were Muslim girls at all. Like, you know, there was it make absolutely no chance. So, you know, there's two options there. Maybe they just created a story. They wanted to scare a bunch of of foreigners, which I don't think so. You know, I've been
Yeah.
around, and or they just don't really give a shit about anything, and that's also a possibility. You know.
And you wrote about this in the Lonely Planet?
I did. Yeah, I wrote about this, you know, and I go more in depth into, you know, really the feeling and the steps and what happened, and I have photos and I show people what it looked like, you know. But, you know, if people would have told me, yeah, that looked like, you know, a bordel, or that looked like a place where you just, you know, you buy a girl for a night and you try to please yourself a little bit, I would have believed that right away. Because, you know, like, it does look like that. It's just really funny that, you know, at the time I was 29 years old, you know, you got a 29 years old writer, a doctor, and a nurse from the Netherlands that look like the most naive person in the world end up in a place like that. You know, like we obviously, you know, got a little too comfortable in Sri Lanka at that point, and we just didn't believe that there was anything like that happening anymore. But, you know, the bottom line is that there's still today a lot of shit happening in Colombo. You know, there's still a lot of unrest. You know, they had a really tough year with, you know, inflation and COVID, and there was still a lot of unrest. If there's a place where something would happen in Sri Lanka, that would probably be around the capital or the north, which, you know, are the more Muslim area of the country, unfortunately. And I'm saying that I love, like, you know, I love Muslim countries. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I spent a lot of time in Northern Africa. I'm not trying to hate on Muslim. I'm just saying, fortunately, there's a little bit of unrest.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to differentiate at the beginning, right? I mean, sure, a lot of listeners already know the differences, but just making sure that there's a big difference between Muslim culture and ISIS. and, but apparently, there's not a big difference between a nightclub and and an ISIS recruitment center. Holy shit!
You know, I also believe that everywhere where you got like those cells, and you see this in North America a lot. You go to some part of Canada, some part of the US with motorcycle clubs, right? You got the motorcycle clubs that are really, really intense, and then you got a bunch of wannabes beside them that pretend that they are part of it, or they're supporting it, and then they don't respect half the rules that those motorcycle clubs have, right? So
Yeah.
was that just, you know, a cell of wannabe guys that just wanted to pretend that, or they were supporting the cause or whatever? You know, with the unrest in the country, the fact that the country is going through a really, really bad financial patch, that's totally possible that, you know, it wasn't really ISIS and it was a recruitment center. It was just some people that thought it was, you know, a good movement in general, or part of it was a good movement, and they wanted to support them. You know, that's also, that might be the case.
Yeah.
But then again, it's a beautiful country, guys. Really, really beautiful country. But I used to love getting in trouble, and I used to have a knack for finding it. So that's what it is.
What other kind of ways do you like to get into trouble, Nick?
I So when I was really much younger in 2005, I wrote an article, and that was my big break as a travel writer. I wrote an article about the weed industry in California. You know, back in the days, 2004, 2005, 2006, you literally could buy weed anywhere in LA. Or San Francisco. That was the easiest thing in the world. You know, you go see one of those, you know, weed doctor, you give him $40, he gives you a weed card, and then you call the number. And I was a naive little Canadian at the time, you know. I'd never seen something like that. So we obviously did it because it was just a fun thing to do. And I'm not a big smoker myself. I'm not like, don't love it.
Wait,
But
just to double check here, did you already visit the west coast of Canada at this point, or were you coming from the east coast?
I visit the West Coast at that time, but I never seen something as organized, you know.
Okay.
You know, obviously Vancouver always had like a big weed culture. Like, don't get me wrong, but there was a full system, you know. There was like everything was organized. Like it shocked me all. Everything had like steps to follow, Whereas, in Vancouver, you go walk around downtown Vancouver or Gastown back in the days, and you just go to the shops and you get it, right? The same
You
way.
knock on the metal door,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
hidden metal door there on
Yeah.
Hastings.
It still had a shady way to do it. Whereas, the California way back in the days was so organized. You go see the doctor, gives you a week card, you pretend that you're anxious or whatever. It took 3 minutes. Venice Beach was full of those guys. And then, literally you call a guy online, he shows up to your house with 40 bags of weed that are all different, and he had a loyalty fucking card. Like, he had a loyalty card where if you were ordering like 7 times in a row, he was giving you a free bag. And the guy, if you were giving him a phone number of someone that wanted to, he was giving you a free fucking brownie. And I literally took pictures of the table, and I wrote about this, and he got me in so much fucking shit. It was great for my career, and it was great for writing, but then I had the fucking US government on my ass, and I had a bunch of things. I went a little too far, and everyone fucking knew about it, just people were not stupid enough to write about it, and I was.
Oh, and where did it get published? Or did they have to take it down after?
It got published in Old Planet. I published it on my personal blog first and foremost. And I used to have a partnership with a group called travelblog.org at the time. So they published it too, and and then I think Ulster World published it at some point. I sold the story to a few people, and finally, at the very, very end, I published it into the New York Times. And this is where I got a lot of problems. But keep in mind, like, that was 2005, I think. Facebook was just starting, like we didn't have access to social media like this. You could play it dumb a lot more than you can today. Like, you can pretend and be in your bubble and be like, that doesn't exist. So when you had people like me writing about that type of crap, you just put it back in the face of everyone else that didn't believe in it, or that were trying to hide the fact that you knew there was something going on, right? And there's nothing wrong about this, like this. Like, today we laugh it off, and nobody here, like, if you got people in their 20s here, they're all going to believe that there's no story of what I'm saying right now. But back in the days, that was a thing. That was really a thing.
Yeah. And when you got in shit, what did you have to do to counter that?
Well, I had to somehow try to prove that I wasn't taking weed. I was just reporting it, right? So,
Taking weed, that's pretty old school too.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you do the marijuana?
I don't know if I do the marijuana. I don't do the marijuana that much anymore. I do alcohol though. Everyone that knows me knows I love my beers, but I do a lot of other. It's been a rough night yesterday. But it's luckily enough at that time I didn't even have a fucking cell phone. So it was all pretty good, but just people knocking on the door, and I my parents got a phone call back in Canada, and my mom starts stressing, and I left my parents' place when I was 17 years old to go backpack, right? My parents didn't get that much news when I was much younger, because I didn't even carry a computer. I used to write articles in fucking internet cafes, so I was pretty hard to get in touch with. And then, you got your mom that just get random news for the first time in 3 weeks. And she's like, this is the U.S. authorities looking for your son. That kind of stuff. And it was like, it was funny. But it's at the time, it was like, okay, I don't want to get banned from the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this would tie this weed conversation into culture. Where do you think the best weed culture is in the world, or from all the places you've traveled?
I think it's in Canada. I think it's in BC. I think that we have the more healthy one. It's been forever. I believe in sustainability quite a bit. There's something to be said that the weed is consumed where it's grown. BC weed is well famous, and it's a great industry. There's a time early 2000 where 60% of the weed in Amsterdam was actually coming from BC, you know, like it's crazy to think that, you know, there's so much land in northern Canada to grow it. There's a perfect temperature in BC to grow it. It makes a lot of sense. So I think the culture is very deep. You know, you go to, there's one thing about Canada right now is you know, transport and airports and weed don't go well together. Except in Vancouver, where there's actually, you know, you got those smoking huts, but you also have a weed smoking hut at the airport. You know, you wouldn't see that in Toronto. You know, it's so that's pretty neat.
If you got a long flight and you can't afford business class like me, the best thing to do is just have some candies, especially CBD, right? That doesn't even get you high, but the CBD, you just melt right into economy class and you feel like you're in business class for way less expensive.
Look, like the bottom line for me is that you got to, you know, you got to know what's good for you and what works for you and what doesn't work for you. You know, some stuff is great, you know, and I don't want to try to move that conversation to hard drugs and all that stuff, but you know, some people can do it really well. Some people, they have the tiniest it and they want to, you know, they go crazy. You know, the problem with regulating those drugs and everything else is that you have to trust your people. And for some countries and some government, they just can't allow that. I think that's what we're doing very great in Canada is that, you know, first of all, we trust our people and we know that most people are going to be able to do it. You know, the money that get collected through it goes through prevention, which is making total sense. And, you know, it's a lot of tax money, so it can help a lot of people. And then also we got a 38 million people population, so you know it's not like trying to establish something in Bangladesh with 200 million people. You know, it's I'm more concerned, if we're going to talk about weed, about Thailand that just legalized pretty much everything you can think of. But the reality is that, you know, you could easily find everything in Thailand to start with. So, and then they decriminalize a bunch of other hard drugs too.
Like Portugal then.
They did, but you know, there's a massive difference between Portugal and Thailand. In Thailand, like the biggest problems with all this, and I'm gonna sound like very old right now, which I'm not. But you know, it's all about knowing where the source is. You know, it's you can trust the system in Europe. You can trust the system in Canada. You know, the wheat that you're buying is coming from one place. You know, you can trace it to a certain extent. It's not the case in Thailand. It's definitely not the case in Thailand. Anyone that did, you know, any trip there or went to party in Phuket or went to party, you know, on one of the islands, know that taking drugs there is basically a call to lose all your shit and probably end up in a situation you don't want to do. So, you know, and I did all kind of stupid things when I was a backpacker, right? And I'm still doing a lot of stupid things. I'm not saying don't do stupid things. They're fun. But, you know, they went from life in prison or 15 years in jail to we're legalizing everything in a year. You know, it makes no sense. Yeah, there's steps, you know.
Do you think there's a lot of corruption going on then?
No, I think that they're trying to make their money back from COVID. If there's a place in the world that got affected by COVID, it's Thailand. You know, they rely on tourism. They rely on, you know, investment from China, from other countries around into, you know, the tourism industry, and they went blank for 3 years, and they need the money to come back. And you know what's better than Coast on Road with weed stand? You know, you used to have to eat to you know you know like those whippets or the balloons. You know?
Yeah, I remember those in Vietnam. Not my thing.
I love them. I love them. It's a 6-7 second buzz and it's great. I love them. But you used to have to hide behind a curtain to get them at the end, you know, because like people were trying to crack on them, and now you can buy weed. So like it went full 360 in a year, you know.
But you're saying like the dangers in Thailand is that sometimes you don't know what you're getting, you don't know what the source is, so you pop a pill and then you wake up and all your shit's gone.
Exactly.
But now that it's legalized, won't that give the opportunity to clean it up because you can go get your drugs checked? Like you know, just using as some raves, for example, like Shambhala in BC, right?
Yeah.
It's a rave. Not all drugs are legal in BC, but in Shambhala at that moment, everything is permitted aside from alcohol. And you can go bring your drugs to the station and they'll test it to be like, okay, this is actually MDMA. This is actually LSD, right? So that you're not waking up with all your shit missing. You don't think that they're going to do that?
I think that's a massive step for them to get there. You know, and I understand what you're saying. I've been to Burning Man, I've been to Africa Burn, you know, like it's 100%. I agree with you. If it was me, everything would be legal. Like, you know, my personality love that. But if I take a step back and I'm like, hey, is it actually good? I think they're going too fast. I think that the system is going to have to catch up. And you also have to understand who's the typical traveler to Thailand. You know, who's going to Bangkok, right? And there's three type of people that go to Bangkok, you know, in general. And those are cliches. And I know I'm pissing off people by saying that, but there's a lot of very young backpackers that came from Australia, that came from the UK. There's a lot of older Americans that are giving their chance at love for the last time. And I'm being polite here.
Aussies, lads, and divorcees.
Yeah, you know. So it was already pretty extreme for a lot of people. And don't get me wrong, like, you know, I've been to Thailand when I was just out of a relationship, and I think I was drunk and I didn't use my bed for 3 weeks straight. You know, just slept in the living room of the hostel. So I used to be one of them. I'm still one of them in a lot of cases. I'm just glad that when I was on that trip, you know, not everything was legal in my face all the time, because I would have probably, you know, did a lot more mistakes. So, you know, I just don't think the system is ready for that much stuff happening in one shot, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Nick, so you've been to Burning Man, and what was the other one? The one in South Africa, right?
Afrika Burn. Yeah.
Afrika Burn.
Yeah.
So there's a whole subculture within that, right?
Yeah.
So can you explain maybe some of the differences between those subcultures when you go to Burning Man in the States versus Burning Man in South Africa?
This is a funny question because I'm working with the Burning Man project right now.
Sorry, Nick, can you just hold the mic a little bit because it's just clicking a bit?
Yeah, you got it better now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a really funky question because I'm working with a Burning Man project right now. You know, the actual business that runs it.
Can you get me a ticket?
Probably. We can talk about that offline. Probably.
Okay.
It's
Future
not,
episode.
Yeah. It's not what it is. It's not what it used to be. You know, there's definitely a corporate version of it now, and they're asked to be a little bit. So you see, Burning Man used to be all about art, right? You used to be public art and a movement and a big subculture. That's still part of it, but they're really moving towards, instead of doing 15 different things, they're trying to be one thing, you know? So there's more and more music happening in Burning Man. It's getting closer to something a little bit more traditional, except it's in the middle of the desert. What you see at Shambhala or you see at Afrika Burn is a lot closer to the original culture of Burning Man, what it used to be at the beginning. You know, a bunch of people that show up with a few things, and then they have to spend a week trading things around to get all the supply they need. A big community that really share a moment together, that's open-minded. You know, subculture getting together is always a great thing because it makes the world better. That's the one-on-one of traveling. If you're traveling, honestly, you're traveling to meet people that doesn't believe in the same thing that you believe in. And the idea is not to believe in what they believe. The idea is to understand why they believe in it so you can be more tolerant, right? This is what traveling is. So Afrika Burn and Burning Man are great for this because they push you. I mean, there's an orgy tent at Burning Man, you know? Like,
I know.
You know, like it's but then again, you go to Berlin, you go to Kit Kat, and it's, you know, everyone's naked and there's a pool in the middle, you know, and it's the same thing. And I'm all for it, you know. It's getting inclusive in life is why I travel. You know, this is why it's so important for me to travel with my son. You know, it's getting him access to things that normally, and he wouldn't see. I hope that he's gonna be a better person for that, you know. So I think that's the idea. Like, I know I'm not answering your question, but you know, I'm curious to see where Burning Man is going. You know.
Okay. And because I've heard some mixed reviews about Burning Man, like they're supposed to um, leave zero waste behind, right? And then I've seen some videos where they don't. Do you think they're improving on that, or?
I think they do a lot of things that people don't know. You know, Burning Man has 14 ranch in the U.S. There's a few in Northern Nevada. They do a lot for R&D. So the project I'm working with them right now is all R&D about how to use green tech and new
Okay,
technology and human powered technology to make the world a better place. And those things
perfect.
are not, you know, those things are never advertised. So, you know, they still have a massive social culture and they're mission driven and they do a lot of great things. But, you know, if you want to change the world on the business side, you got to stay in business, you know, because you can have the best ideas in the world if you actually, you know, are killing your business because you're trying to do too much at the same time. You will, and nothing is perfect. You know, getting that many people into a desert is probably never going to be perfect, and it was never intended to be that big. You know, it's you see those images of people in lineups for 3.5 hours in their cars on the way out of the desert at the end of the festival, and you're like, yeah, this is terrible. Like it
Hmm.
shouldn't be like that. This is, you know, the emission you're getting out of those cars and everything else is just crazy bad. And that was not the image that Burning Man was supposed to be at the beginning. But
Yeah,
you know, can you really not do that? You know, that's the question I'm asking. You know.
yeah, and sometimes when I think about Shambhala or Burning Man, uh, do you feel like the people running this are first and foremost businessmen that kind of are latching on to this? They would maybe call it a brand image of this subculture and this kind of free spirit culture? Or do you think first and foremost they are part of that culture and they're figuring out how to use their business instinct to reach a broader public? Because to me, it kind of makes a difference. Like maybe it ends up being the same result, but I don't know. You know, like if I see some Shambhala, like the owner of Shambhala, and he's some guy in a suit and a crew cut and everything, like I don't really want to support that as much as someone that's authentically part of that subculture movement.
Yeah, I think it's a very complex question, Nolan. Like, to be honest with you, like the people I work with there are very authentic people, you know,
Okay.
and but then they also do a lot of business, and I like to see myself the same way, you know. I have a dress shirt right now, and I'm going to be wearing a suit today in an event, you know. But then again, if you ask me, I would rather have a t-shirt and my Converse, you know, that's what I am. But at the end of the day, you know, I believe that people have different personalities and different things, and we have more than one purpose in life. You know, I think it's the same thing. We got to accept that those people actually need to make it work, and there's a business
Mhm.
behind it. And I'm more I'm more judging them on what they do with the profit. You know, how's that profit redistributed? Is it just a bunch of big salaries and then it's like game over, or they're actually taking that money back and doing a bunch of R&D project? Are they doing it to do social help project? And my experience with the Burning Man project group is that they actually do. They actually take that money and make the world a better place. So is that the case with Africa Burn? Is that the case with everyone else? I honestly don't know. I don't know the Africa Burns owner well. So I cannot say that, but the people I work with at Burning Man, they're definitely, you know, well attended. They try to do a better job, you know.
Yeah. Another thing I was wondering about with Burning Man is because I know a lot of celebrities go there as well. Like Seth Rogen writes about it in his book,
Yeah.
Yearbook, right? And when other people who aren't celebrities show up there, are they trying to go to those celebrities? Like, does that kind of ruin it? Like, is there a divide between it, or is just everyone on acid and their egos are just dissipated, so no one really thinks about that kind of shit?
Well, I mean, the year that I went, I hang out with a DJ, a Dutch DJ that was called Ike Klein. that maybe some people know, some people don't know. And he wasn't that famous at the time, and he's a pretty big DJ now. And he was the most human, nice person in the world. You know, he was just chilling with us and dancing and hugging us and having fun. I think that there's something to be said about celebrities getting close to the people and show their normal side, or they have to be on edge all the time. Crazy shit happens to them. They always get bugged all the time. Like, they can't have a moment to themselves. So, but then again, if we're not letting them come to events like this, we're alienating them even more. We're putting them in the box even deeper. And, we need to let them have that moment. So,
Yeah.
You're going to have good celebrities going to those events, and you're going to have the shit ones,
Well, what I'm wondering, do you see a lot of people bugging the celebrities, or is it?
Oh, yeah,
different
100%. Well, 100%. 100%. I think maybe less that you would see in a restaurant, but yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Because I would kind of have this feeling that if you're at a rave, you might be less likely to care about someone's status, right? Because that's kind of what it's about. It's not about what your status is. Everyone there is one. As a cliche or hippie that sounds, like, you do get that feeling at a rave, right? You're just
you just don't have it's not what it used to be. I hate saying that because it makes everyone sound like, and my parents used to say that my music is better, it was better, and you listen to shit and blah blah blah, but unfortunately those events are not what they used to be. Like, 100%. They're a lot more commercial, there's a lot more happening. It's not what they used to be in terms of accessibility and everything. So there's people going to Burning Man that are very much going to Burning Man because it's really cool to say on social media that they've been to Burning Man, and they're not really into that full culture. And I saw people break down there because they're just not having fun because it's way too deep for them. And then you got a bunch of people that go there. Like, I have a friend that, he's a professional slackliner, and, he's has a stream for this that anyone I ever met in my life. He goes once every 3 months. He goes in the middle of a desert somewhere to do a retreat for 2-3 weeks and he goes to this, and he's exactly the type of people that were targeted to go to that type of place at the beginning with. So, I think you got a very big mix of people, but it's also, like, to what I was saying earlier, it's great that they actually get to spend time together because maybe they're going to find a middle ground here. And that's what this is what traveling is all about.
Yeah, yeah. And when I think about some of these subcultures and kind of the rave culture as well, it kind of defies borders, because when you travel the world, and, well, most of the raves I went to were when I was younger in British Columbia. But I've seen the type of people that go to the raves all around the world, and it's kind of homogenous, right? Like, they have a lot of the same beliefs, a lot of the same values. Do you think that this type of rave culture, the subculture, does defy borders? Or do you find, like, when you travel around and you go to these different festivals, that there's always a little bit of a different cultural flair depending on where it is?
There's a different flair. I grew up in Montreal, right? And Montreal is one of the best places in the world to do this, right? I grew up, there was two clubs, one in front of the other, one called Circus, the other one called Stereo. I think Circus is closed now, but Stereo is still open, and I think they just celebrated their 23rd anniversary, which, to be honest with you, I was there last week. And they, they're a club that opens at 2 a.m. They don't sell alcohol, and they're open sometimes for 26 hours straight, but they're very much a club. And what I love about that place is that everyone is a different age. You got all kind of people from all over the world, and they're all having fun. You got a 65 years old guy that's dancing in front of a 22 years old girl, and I'm not trying to make it sound crazy, but you got people from all over the place, a bunch of backgrounds, and yeah, you got people that are very deep in the culture, and you got people that are there just because they want to party their head out. But if you take a holistic view on this, yeah, there's a lot of bad shit happening in those clubs, and there's a lot of illegal drugs, and there's people that shouldn't take drugs that don't know enough about it, and they're taking it for the first time, and they're not going to be good. But then again, there's also a beauty of doing it for the first time in front of people that are very deep in it, and that if there's something happening, they can help you or they're going to sort you out. Not everyone has a bad intention, right? There's some people that actually are okay. So I'm all for it. I think that places like this do exist. I just think that doing it, I personally, when I was younger, and I was more in the culture, I like doing it in smaller places. I thought that festivals were a little bit overrated. They were too big. There was too much going on at the same time, and it was less my thing. But then I'm old now. I can't do that. When I do that, I feel bad for 4 days straight after.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Another thing that ties into this, do you think culture plays a big role in how drugs affect you?
Yes. I mean,
Me too.
placebo is a real thing. Placebo is a real thing. Um, you know, drugs makes me nostalgic, really big. I believe I become a better person, honestly. I listen more and I talk more, I open more to people, and I'm more interested in them. So they're definitely better for me. Some people are not good with them. I'm actually pretty decent with them. But I go through memory lane. You get my cell phone out my ends because I'm gonna call people I haven't called in 15 years and start chatting like I was with them yesterday. So
Yeah.
it does bother my friends that I do that, but it's me, right? So yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because I've noticed it here, like now living in Spain. How you said at a rave, sometimes it's really cool because you see people from all different age groups there. And I remember that's one of the things that really drew me to that culture in British Columbia, because you just realize like, oh my God, everyone's just getting along. You got you got some kids here, you got families, you got everyone. But here in Spain, that already exists. Um, with the regular festivals without drugs, right? Um, so I don't know if the rave culture would have the same effect here. I haven't really been to raves here, and I don't really want to, because from all the ones I've heard, they just end up being more of that grunge scene and like speed and techno, and that's not really my thing. I'm more about the hippie
Sauna,
vibe, I guess.
yeah, Sauna is actually quite nice in Spain. It's a really nice festival, but Barcelona had a really good scene for a very long time of like a little bit more underground. The Terraza was transforming from a mall to a club in the middle of the night, on weekends, and that was quite interesting. It's a very different setting. You're on Montjuic and you were shopping for clothes all day, and then you're in a club in the middle of the night with the clothes around you. That was quite unique. You got Rasmatas was a really decent place and well renowned club that people all over the world used to go to. Obviously, this is not Ibiza. That's a lot more underground, and that's more the scene. Obviously, if you go to Opium on the beach, yeah, you're getting the Ibiza vibe, and that's something you can see everywhere. You got to get Tiesto playing. But it's I agree with you. I'm more into the subculture than I am into mainstream, that's for sure. But yeah, you're right. In Europe, you see it a lot more. Like, I'm from Ireland. I just spent the last 3 months of my life in Ireland, where you go to any pub and you got people from all the world, all different age, talking to each other. And that's beautiful. You never see that in Canada. You never see it in Canada.
Definitely.
No.
Do you think it's going to change in Canada and it's going to spread a little bit now that the laws have become a little bit more lax when it comes to bringing, like nowadays you go to a brewery and people bring their kids into the brewery. It's still not common, but definitely more common than it was 15 years ago, because 15 years ago it was non-existent.
I think that culturally we're a little bit different. And it's not a bad thing to be different. I think we can open up a lot more. I think that people should talk to each other more in Canada. But then again, it's one of the best countries in the world for a lot of things too. So, it makes a trip to Ireland special to me, So it's not a bad thing. Not everything has to change. Same thing. You go to Scandinavia and there's a bunch of things happening in Scandinavia that you're just like, hey, wow, we were talking about drugs. We could talk about Copenhagen, and have a massive conversation about what's Christiania becoming nowadays. It's
I
not really
didn't like it. I went, and because I thought this is going to be my scene, and then I went there, and I don't know. It was dirtier than I thought. I thought it was going to be a little bit more free-spirited and everything, but I kind of got like a negative vibe there. Is that just an anomaly? What do you?
I think that, you probably would have went 10 years ago. Would have felt a little bit more at home. And
I
that's,
went 5 years ago.
yeah,
I don't know when I went. 6 years ago, 5 years
yeah.
ago.
It's not what it used to be, 100%. The cops are cracking on the dealers all the time, and there's a stress in Christiania where
That's what I felt.
yeah, you feel anxious, you feel like you're looking over it feels very illegal. It feels a little bit like Berlin, to be honest. Um,
I love Berlin.
I love Berlin. It's my favorite city
I
in the
could
world.
never live there because I would die, but
I feel the same way. I would probably die if I live in Berlin, but and I lived in Berlin for a little bit, and I got the fuck out of it. And there's nothing worse than getting into the S band or the U band at 8 in the morning, coming out from the clubs and seeing everyone in a suit going to work, and you just like, I'm making bad choice in life, like, and that happened to me too many times. Like, Berlin's great. I feel like Christiania, to an extent, was a part of the Berlin culture. You could see resemblance. I think it's very stressful and overhyped nowadays, but it's still beautiful that something so everything else was there for so long. This, to me, it's historical. Like Denmark was so far from this 30 years ago, like so far.
yeah,
So it's pretty neat.
yeah. All right. Well, Nick, can we finish this episode off with a story? Do you have any party story that you're willing to share?
Party stories.
You can tell me some more after, but one
Party
that you're willing to
stories.
share?
Yeah, I mean, party stories. Let me think.
Of
Party.
course, one that relates a little bit to culture and maybe one of your solo traveling experiences, or maybe not solo, just related to one of your travel
Yeah, well, I mean,
experiences.
woke up in a different country once.
Okay, yes, let's let's get into that.
So in the south of Cambodia, there's a few islands, Karom, Samloen, etc., and they're very close to Vietnamese islands. And it's a really tricky border, like the islands are almost in Vietnam, and the international waters does zigzags and everything like that. So, without getting into too much details, because I got myself in trouble with other countries I don't want to get in trouble with, but got into the wrong fishing boat, very drunk at 5:30 in the morning, and end up in Vietnam without going through the border. And then, as a Canadian, because I travel with my Canadian passport, Vietnam is actually tricky to go to. We need a visa to get to Vietnam, and you need to go through an airport, or you need to plan ahead and go through a border at a certain day and everything. So I was illegally in Vietnam, and that's not good. So it took me 2 days to find a fishing boat that wanted to bring me back to Cambodia. But I have no idea how I got in that thing. I just got too friendly with the people and just start chatting and chatting and chatting. And at one point, they probably thought I just wanted to gun with him. So because the locals just cross the border like there's no tomorrow, right? They don't really care.
Yeah.
They know they won't get in trouble. So
Oh, that's amazing. I also remember when I was in Vietnam, I had to get my visa extended,
yeah,
and I asked how to do this, and we had to bring our passports to this tailor where they're making clothes, and you go to the back of the tailor store, you give the guy your passports, and then he takes your passports, drives them down to Saigon or Ho Chi Minh, and then comes back a couple days later with your passport stamped. And I thought, like, there's no way this is how you do it. Like, this goes against everything you learn before traveling. And then the more people ask them, that's how you do it. And I did it, and it worked. It was fast, it was reliable, it was cheap, and it was actually one of the easier visa extension experiences I've had.
Oh, well, I mean, when I was working in Cambodia at the beginning, every 2 months we had to get our visa renewed too, and you got to leave the country to get back in to get a visa renewed on the normal like tourism visa. And we used to go to Kampot, take a taxi for 20 minutes, get to the Vietnamese border, give $10 to the Viet guy. He would take your passport, walk the border, stamp it, walk it back in, stamp it, give it back
I
to
was
you.
gonna say $10 goes a long way in Vietnam.
You know, and you're not like, I'm not even allowed to go to Vietnam without a visa. They would still do it, you know? The only problem is that they're taking a full bloody fucking page every time, and that's another issue and another story. But, you know, there's so many of them. I got stories of getting completely lost in Bangkok in the middle of the night, trying to find my way back with, you know, no cell phone reception and in the small. I had to jump a canal once. That was a funny story. I hurt myself so much.
Oh man, well this is just how I ended the last episode, saying, Nick, I hope you come back on the show because I know you have so many stories. Nick and I were actually talking. We will probably make this an ongoing thing. Nick will definitely be a recurring guest on the show. So for any listeners right now, remember you can reach out to Nick on LinkedIn or on Instagram. The links will be in the description. Also, please check out withoutborders.fyi because there you can also comment. You can become part of the community there. And maybe you'll want to mention and ask Nick about some of the stories he just hinted towards today. And maybe you can tell us what you want to hear for the next episode. Nick, anything else you want to say before we finish this up?
No, I think travel is important, guys, and stay away from bloody resorts. Do something else. Or if you go to the resort, actually venture out the resort for a day. You know, go meet people, get yourself in trouble a little bit. Nothing kills people, you know, like just try it.
Exactly. All right, Nick, thanks for coming on the show again. And thank you for tuning in, everyone. Please check out the next episode. See you next time.
All right, cheers.